The playoffs are supposed to be about basketball at its purest. The best teams colliding, every possession magnified, every whistle carrying weight. But when the Indiana Fever stepped into their opening game against the Atlanta Dream, the story was less about basketball and more about survival. Not just survival through the storm of Atlanta's depth and talent, but survival against the very people meant to ensure fairness, the referees. For head coach Stephanie White, the breaking point came when the whistles turned the game into something unrecognizable. She exploded on the sideline, earning a technical foul not for losing her composure, but for voicing what every Fever fan watching already knew. Something wasn't right. Indiana's nightmare started before tip-off. Imagine showing up to the playoffs already down half your rotation. Caitlin Clark, gone with a groin injury. Chloe Bibby, out with a knee. Sophie Cunningham and Sydney Colson, both sidelined by knee injuries. Ari McDonald, foot injury. And then, as if fate was laughing, Damaris Dantas was ruled out just hours before tip-off due to concussion protocol. 6 players. 6 reliable rotation pieces stripped away before the opening buzzer. The Fever had fought through adversity all year, clawing their way to the 6th seed, only to walk into the postseason like a team stitched together with tape and grit. And yet, even battered and undermanned, they weren't going to back down. The sight on the bench was almost surreal. 6 players in street clothes filled up so much space that the Fever didn't have enough seats. A second row had to be formed just to fit everyone. It looked more like a reunion than a playoff bench. But behind the humor of Sophie Cunningham joking she'd basically joined the medical staff now was a cruel reality. Indiana wasn't stepping into battle with reinforcements. They were sending out whoever was still standing. Still, there was something about that image, the full team traveling together, refusing to leave anyone behind, that screamed resilience. And early on, that resilience translated into fight. Kelsey Mitchell came out firing, dropping buckets with the confidence of a player who refused to let the moment overwhelm her. Aaliyah Boston threw her body into the paint, snagging boards, challenging Atlanta's size, and proving once again why she's the backbone of Indiana's future. The Fever stunned the Dream with a 15-6 start, playing like a team that hadn't heard the whispers of doubt all season. For a few minutes, it felt like maybe, just maybe, the impossible was about to happen. Then came the whistles. Ryan Howard slipped on her own whistle. Foul on Indiana. Lexi Hull fought for position, whistle. Foul on Hull. Kelsey Mitchell brushed a hip, whistle. Foul again. It became a pattern so blatant that fans watching at home didn't need slow-motion replays to know what was going on. Meanwhile, Atlanta's physicality, elbows in the paint, shoves under the rim, was allowed to continue unchecked. Boston absorbed hit after hit with no calls to protect her. The referees weren't just making mistakes. They were tilting the floor. Stephanie White was forced into a nightmare scenario. She had to burn both of her coach's challenges in the first half just to keep her team afloat. Both times, the replay confirmed the obvious: the calls were wrong. But with her challenges gone, Indiana was left vulnerable to whatever came next. And the whistles didn't stop. By the fourth quarter, when White finally snapped and barked at the officials after yet another missed call, the technical came swift. It wasn't just punishment for her words, it was a warning to sit down and accept the injustice. The impact of that officiating went beyond the scoreboard. It drained energy. It disrupted rhythm. It turned clean defensive stops into free throws, momentum into stoppages, and effort into frustration. Odyssey Sims dove for a loose ball that should have been celebrated as hustle. Instead, another foul. The Fever weren't just playing Atlanta, they were playing the referees. And the Dream knew it. They capitalized on the chaos, using the whistles as fuel for a third-quarter surge that Indiana couldn't recover from. And yet, through all of it, the Fever kept fighting. Kelsey Mitchell delivered one of the greatest playoff performances of her career. 27 points, 4 assists, a block, and endless grit. Every time Indiana's offense threatened to stall, Mitchell found a way to drag it back to life. Aaliyah Boston, despite foul trouble and double teams, fought her way to 12 rebounds, wrestling in the paint against bigger bodies and constant contact. Lexi Hull, too, embodied what makes this team so dangerous despite its record, heart. She buried one of the Fever's rare threes, chased Atlanta around screens, and refused to fade even when the odds screamed at her to quit. But the absence of Caitlin Clark hung over everything. Without her, The Fever had no one to stretch Atlanta's defense. No one to force the Dream to guard 25 feet from the basket. Atlanta packed the paint with impunity, daring Indiana's supporting cast to make them pay from outside. 2 for 15 from three-point range told the story. Without Clark, the Dream didn't even pretend to respect Indiana's perimeter. They suffocated Boston inside, collapsed on Mitchell's drives, and forced rushed shots from anyone else. Still, what defined the Fever that night wasn't defeat. It was defiance. They played until the final buzzer, refusing to let the whistles or injuries strip away their identity. And now, the story shifts. For the first time since 2016, Indiana will host a playoff game inside Gainbridge Fieldhouse. Nearly a decade of waiting has built to this moment. The crowd will be loud, desperate, and hungry to remind the league that playoff basketball in Indiana still matters. Stephanie White knows the task ahead. Execution has to be flawless. The ball must move. Turnovers must vanish. And someone, whether it's Brianna Turner, Tiffany Mitchell, or Hartley, must rise as a secondary scorer to relieve pressure off Kelsey Mitchell. Because Atlanta won't shrink. Their depth, their size, their confidence, all of it will come crashing into Gainbridge. But Indiana has something Atlanta doesn't: the crowd. 17,000 voices who have been waiting nearly a decade for this night. They can't block Ryan Howard. They can't box out Brittany Griner. But they can make every Indiana run feel like a tidal wave, every stop feel like a gut punch, and every Dream possession a little more suffocating. The Fever don't just step into Game 2 with their season on the line. They step in carrying every scar of a season riddled with injuries, every ounce of frustration from a game stolen by officiating, and every bit of hunger from a city that's been waiting for this return. Win or lose, what happens at Gainbridge will define this team's season. Because if they pull off the impossible, it won't just be a win on the scoreboard. It'll be a declaration that nothing, not injuries, not whistles, not even the weight of history, can keep them down. Do you think the Fever were robbed by the referees in Game 1? Or was it simply the cruel reality of playoff basketball?